Thank you. Good morning. I call this special meeting to order. City Council, 9:01, December 18th, 2020. Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Blom,
Present.
Councilmember Brenner,
Here.
Councilmember Dixon,
Present.
Councilmember Duffield,
Here.
Councilmember O'Neill,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Muldoon,
Here.
Mayor Avery.
Here. And now, Mr. O'Neill will lead us in the invocation.
Lord, we thank you for the ability to gather. We ask that you watch over us, guide us, and grant us wisdom as we make decisions going forward today. We ask that you watch over our men and women working at hospitals in particular. We ask that you watch over those people who are sick. Please get them better. We ask that you watch over those people who are healthy. Please keep them that way. We ask you watch over our, given the topic that we're going to be discussing today, we especially ask that you watch over our law enforcement personnel as they continue to face a tough year and they're going to go into another difficult year. We ask that you watch over them and guide them. We ask you watch over their families, grant them peace, and deliver them safely back home. And these things we ask in thy name. Amen.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Blom will lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We're on to public comments on non-agenda items. Anyone in the community room? Yeah, Jack. There he is.
Oh,
But we don't have any audio.
hold on, Mr. Mosier.
Thank you. Mayor Avery, members of the council, this is Jim Mosier. I had several non-agenda comments this morning. First of all, regarding special meetings, I wanted to remind you that when you met 10 days ago, 5 of you voted for staff to set up an agenda item entitled Consideration of Staff Assisting with this year's Newport Beach Boat Parade. That would have involved a special meeting. If that special meeting happened, I missed it. Number 2, today's special meeting. At this meeting, you will be discussing intervening in county legislation. I wanted to make you aware. I wanted to be sure that you are aware of a recent lawsuit against the city involving the airport, in which I think Newport Beach has a very direct interest. As you may know, the city strongly urged the county to require all scheduled air carriers to operate out of the main passenger terminal. I understand that last week, Jet Suite X, doing business as JSX, has sued the county over that requirement. And since the city is the party that encouraged the city to do that, and since Jet Suite X is attacking the validity of the airport access plan, which is the heart of what is supposed to be protected by our settlement agreement, I think it's very much in our interest, if we're not already a party to that lawsuit, to intervene in that. Probably more important than the one you're discussing today. And then finally, since the theme of today's meeting seems to be law and order and supporting our county sheriff, I wanted to bring to your attention 2 non-agenda law and order items. The first of which is to bring to your attention that staff has been trying to clean up structures that have been unlawfully erected over the public waters in our harbor without benefit of permits or following the harbor design standards approved by the council. At last week's Harbor Commission meeting, the commission heard the appeal of the first of those notices of violation, and the Harbor Commission told the staff to stand down and not enforce those laws and regulations. The second item and final one of my comment involves me personally, and it's regarding the right of a Newport Beach homeowner to remove an unwelcome guest who is trespassing in their home. I want to let you know that after completing the steps for lawfully removing such a person as detailed on the Orange County Sheriff's website, homeowners will discover that neither the sheriff nor the police will intervene and help the homeowner with that situation. I don't have time to give you the details of either of these, but I will write to you in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to current business and the only item that's on our agenda this morning. And this item is a request to authorize the city attorney to take action to support Sheriff Barnes' challenge to the judicial order releasing approximately 1,800 inmates into Orange County. Since the staff report was printed, the judge informed Sheriff Barnes that no inmates are required to be released prior to January 8th, 2021. However, this impending release of so many incarcerated, including inmates being held on charges of murder, attempted murder, and child molestation, is very concerning for our residents and businesses. This is a very difficult time for everyone, given the state of the pandemic, not only citizens, but businesses and certainly law enforcement. Before hearing comments from other council members, it is important to know that Sheriff Barnes has taken the significant action to keep inmates safe from the spread of COVID-19. Ordering the release of these individuals would pose a significant burden for our community, as well as other nearby communities and law enforcement countywide. Council has received many emails urging support of this judicial challenge. Vaccinations have begun in Orange County, and an end to the pandemic is on the horizon. I support Sheriff Barnes' effort to continue protecting our community, particularly during the peak of the COVID-19 outbreak. We will now hear comments from other council members, followed by public input. Thank you. Anyone wish to speak? Mr. O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, for calling this special meeting. The request is fortunately fairly straightforward. The issue underlying the request is unfortunately not. The original Orange County court ruling that the mayor just referenced ordered the release of approximately 1,800 inmates from the Orange County Jail. It appears that the judge has modified the order to contemplate the release of approximately 1,000 inmates, which many of our residents would agree is 1,000 too many. Our sheriff is in charge of running the jail and has stated his refusal to follow the order. Our district attorney has stated his intention to file an amicus brief supporting the sheriff. Both our sheriff and our district attorney have stated clearly that this order would result in an extraordinary degradation of safety in our county, including, of course, in our city. For example, our sheriff has identified that of the 700 inmates considered medically vulnerable under the CDC's guidelines, 59 inmates are incarcerated for murder, 39 inmates for attempted murder, and 90 for child molestation. Since it is rare to incarcerate any misdemeanors these days, as our police chief would let us know if requested, the remainder can be assumed to be felons as well. In fact, the first person to petition for early release in light of the ruling is Ezra Schley of Huntington Beach. Schley is 72 years old and is charged with felony aggravated kidnapping for ransom and extortion, felony residential burglary, felony attempted extortion, and misdemeanor carrying a loaded firearm in public. He is one of 4 defendants charged in connection with kidnapping an Irvine woman from her apartment and holding her for 2 days in an attempt to extort a large sum of money from her husband and mother-in-law. And yet, his concern for catching COVID could lead to his release. This is insanity. It appears that the recent ruling focused myopically on the risk of COVID to inmates. There was no contemplation of the risk of COVID outside the jail, nor was there any contemplation of the victim's rights or any future victims of people like the young woman kidnapped by Schley. There was no balancing of whether there is even a heightened risk of catching COVID in jail. Indeed, 45,890 people not in jail have tested positive for COVID in Orange County in the last 30 days. Santa Ana, where the jail is located, has had 9,867 people test positive, which is nearly 4 times the current population of the jail in the last 30 days. I read through the court order and saw no proof offered that a person released from jail is at a lower risk of catching COVID. But even if there was a heightened risk, how high must the risk be to justify release in a person charged with murder? According to the LA Times tracking, the mortality rate in prisons has been 0.3%, whereas the mortality rate of murder is 100%. Honestly, what's going on right now? Since when has the criminal become more important than the victim? I can say honestly in Newport Beach, the answer is never. This ruling must be reversed, and our city ought to play a role in helping in that reversal. Our city manager and our city attorney have heard from other cities interested in joining in this effort. Multiple other cities have special meetings scheduled to do just that. So let's join the fight, because it's the right thing to do right now.
Mr. Muldoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great words, Councilman O'Neill. There's no other way to say it except that this ruling is dangerous. It is dangerous to the health and safety of the individuals in Orange County, and it sets a dangerous precedent. Many are telling us that we're not allowed to use outdoor dining. We should stay home in some areas of the state, not even going outside. Yet they're forcing many people who are under due process restrictions for the sake of having a speedy and fair trial to not be inside, but to go outside and join the public. It's illogical, it's dangerous, and it must be fought by all of us. Thank you.
Ms. Brenner.
Good morning, everyone. I would just like to say that I think that we have complete unanimity in our community in support of this action. I don't know anyone who is arguing that they should be releasing criminals. And in addition, I don't think that an argument has been made that they are safer out of jail than they are in jail. In fact, I'm wondering if they might not be safer in jail than they would be in crowded home conditions, endangering their families, or if they don't have homes, being part of the homeless community. It seems like there was not a good argument for them to actually take this course of action. And I think our community is absolutely unified in our support of Sheriff Barnes.
Dixon.
It appears not only is the community aligned, but other cities are aligned and want to protect the safety of our residents in our communities. This is the beginning of many kinds of actions that are happening across our state where the people who are incarcerated, the criminals, are looked upon as the victims. When we have communities of crime victims that we want ourselves, that we want to keep our communities safe. So I strongly support our recommendation this morning, a motion to, have we had a motion yet?
Not yet.
Well, I'd be happy to make it or second that motion to support Sheriff Barnes to keep our community safe and keep these prisoners in jail where they belong until their trials have adjudicated the outcome of their crime and keep our community safe, especially during this holiday period or post-holiday. COVID, it's totally difficult for us to understand why we would be faced with this situation today when we're trying to keep everybody safe from COVID as well as from crime. Thank you very much.
Do we have any further comment from council?
Mr. Mayor, it's just a matter of procedure, and we can probably talk about this after the public comments, but as we've done in the past with amicus briefs, it's probably worth mentioning just a couple things. The first is for members of the public, it's to understand what we would be recommending. There are a number of legal terms that matter in the matter of procedure on this, and so I would just mention real briefly. Mr. Mosier mentioned the word intervene. We wouldn't actually be intervening. Intervening would mean to actually become a party to the lawsuit in this matter. We would not intend on doing so. We would instead plan on filing what's called an amicus brief. An amicus brief is otherwise known in Latin as the friend of the court brief. What it means is that we would be filing a brief essentially on behalf of our residents, saying that there are public policy reasons and legal reasons why the decision ought to be reversed. My understanding from members of the Sheriff's Department is that they plan on filing their appeal by Monday at the latest. And so we would be asked to file our amicus brief by Tuesday or Wednesday at the latest of next week. It is a matter of just process so that we don't have have to have another special meeting to approve the actual language of the brief. I would ask that we do what we also have normally done in these situations, which is essentially appoint a small ad hoc or however we want to phrase it, to just work with our city attorney. I, of course, would offer my services to help with the city attorney on finalizing or working through and finalizing the brief for filing. Also, as a matter of process, it strikes me that I've heard from a handful of cities that they are considering joining ours, actually. So I'm not aware of any city that has drafted their own yet. We would not go to outside counsel, just to be clear on this one. So to the extent it costs us money, it would be staff time that we would already be paying for. And so the expectation would be that this would be handled internally. It would not be a terribly long or onerous brief. And my guess is that there would be other cities that would be willing to join it. So when we get to the point of making a motion, it would probably be to approve this, but I would also recommend that we have either one or two council members oversee and approve the final draft, and as well as authorize our city attorney to allow other cities to join if they so chose at their special meetings.
Thank you. Any other comments from council? Yep.
Mr. O'Neill, is that in form of a motion, or is that just a suggestion?
It's not a motion, just because I'd want to ask Aaron, our city attorney, for folks watching, if I needed to put any of that into the motion, but I wanted to at least work through the process of it. So,
Okay,
So it's not a motion yet.
Okay. I would just like to add that this will have a direct financial impact if it were to occur on our resources, whether it's the things you can't measure, like quality of life or someone's actual life, or whether it's financial resource required from the police and support services. So at some point down the road, if this lawsuit even were to cost something above staff time, I think that we would all be agreeable that we would allocate budget funds from the budget for that purpose. It's definitely an excellent point that we have our own attorneys who are going to be doing this, and that probably is going to be done with the other cities as well. But you can let the sheriff know, Mr. Harp, that we have other financial resources available. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments from council? Seeing none, we'll go back out for public comment.
Mayor Avery, members of the council, this is Jim Mosier again. This is one of the very rare occasions that the public has an opportunity to see its city council discuss litigation. I was hoping for a staff report and a meaningful discussion of the actual litigation that you are considering becoming involved in, so that I would not think that this is simply a feel-good tribal grandstanding of the kind that this country sees much too much of. I therefore thank Councilmember O'Neill for providing a little background on exactly what it is you're proposing to do. I believe I heard him say earlier that the sheriff could simply refuse to follow the order, which would seem a simple and inexpensive solution. Apparently that's not what you're discussing. I think I heard that the sheriff is planning to file an appeal of the court order rather than asking the judge to further revise it, and that we are going to file some kind of a brief supporting that appeal. Councilmember Muldoon mentioned that the financial impact of these inmates being released may be very hard to evaluate. I do think the public should know how much city resources the council is committing to this effort. I ask that in part because the lawsuit is against the county, and the county has far more financial and legal resources than we have, and I am wondering what the city brings to the plate in this. I am not a lawyer, but it's my understanding of appeals is that they have to be based on the material that was presented to the trial judge and evaluate his decision based on what was presented to him. Like Councilmember O'Neill, I read the order. It explained in detail the judge's reasoning, part of which was that the Sheriff Barnes, unfortunately, seems to have completely failed in the trial court to respond to the allegations or to even raise the issue of whether the impact of releasing the inmates should be weighed, the impact on the health of the inmates should be weighed against the public impact of releasing them. So I am wondering if there's even an opportunity to raise that question that has so much public support in the appeal of the matter if it was not raised at the trial court. And a couple of other points I would want to make is I read in the appeal that the sheriff had voluntarily, earlier in the COVID pandemic, reduced the jail population by 50%. So this is kind of like our closing the beaches, where we were going to do that ourselves, and then when we were ordered to do it, say we would not do it. So I'm a little confused by that. Also mentioned in the order is that an outbreak in the jail endangers the public, so there is an issue of that sort. And finally, I would like to point out that I don't believe everybody in the jail is actually convicted of a crime. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment? Thank you, Mr. O'Neill.
Yeah, it's worth kind of walking through some of that and explaining it. I may rely on Mr. Harp, but I'm going to try a little bit on my own here. So there's a lot to unpack there, but let's start with the beginning, which is that's true. A number of the people in the jail currently have not been convicted. They're awaiting their charges, just like I had mentioned with Mr. Schley. Many of them have been charged with multiple felonies, and the reason they're being held is not because they jaywalked. It's probably worth remembering that as we're talking through the severity of crimes that people have been charged with. There are also a number of inmates who are currently waiting prison transfer, but the prisons have refused to accept them because of COVID. And so those people are not exactly open for early release because they should already be in prison, but the folks up in Sacramento who have overseen prisons have decided not to accept more prisoners to avoid overcrowding, which has caused overcrowding apparently in the jails. To the other point about the reduction at the beginning of the pandemic, yes, the court's recent ruling identified a reduction at the beginning of the pandemic, but that was done early, before all of the prisons stopped accepting prisoners, and it was also done so in a way that ensured that the criminals who had, or people who had been charged with lower level offenses had not been, had been some of the earliest released. That's the point now. We're not exactly facing those. We don't have those low level criminals behind bars any longer, and that's the point that was being made, not just by our sheriff, but also by our district attorney. And as far as the appeal goes, I'm not going to get too much in the weeds on this, but I'll just note that this is not what you would call a true appeal. It's going to be a writ. A writ is a different animal than a true appeal. A true appeal would be something after a final judgment. This is not a final judgment. This is an interim order. The interim order is challenged via a process called a writ. There are very specific procedural mechanisms and evidentiary issues that go along with a writ that are probably not worth getting into in terms of the detail right now, but I will note that there are plenty of opportunities for appellate court judges to analyze the evidence presented, analyze the evidence presented in amicus briefs, whether they're from cities or from the district attorney who has said he will be filing his own amicus brief. And then the last note that I'll point out is that the order did not did not put forth all of the evidence. There were multiple depositions and declarations and et cetera, that reasonable minds could have read and come to a very different conclusion in terms of the evidentiary bases upon which a ruling could be had. So I would just point that out, that there is a lot more to the eye than just the order itself. Did I miss anything, Mr. Harp? That was a lot, but I think I covered it.
I think you got everything.
Okay. So coming back around, Mr. Harp, I had mentioned earlier that I thought the appropriate process would be to ask one or two council members. I volunteered to help and oversee the filing. Does that need to be, and then also potentially allow other cities to join in? Does any of that need to be made as part of the motion?
Yeah, I think it'd probably be appropriate to go ahead and move staff recommendation and then go ahead and form an ad hoc committee to assist us with this.
Right.
Appoint a couple council members to it.
I know we're heading into the holiday season, but does anyone want to join up on the ad hoc, Mr. Muldoon? Okay, that makes sense. We'll put the two lawyers up on this one. All right, I'll make the motion to approve staff recommendation with an ad hoc created with Mr. Muldoon and myself as a part of it to oversee the filing of the amicus brief no later than Tuesday of next week, assuming the writ itself is filed by Monday of next week, with the qualification as well that we would allow other cities to join if they so requested before the filing itself. Do I have a second?
And I'll second with a notation that not all lawyers are bad.
if there's any implication in that motion. Okay.
Madam Clerk?
Since there's no more public comments, we'll be handling the voting verbally. Councilmember Blom? Aye. Okay. Councilmember Brenner?
Aye.
Councilmember Dixon? Councilmember Duffield? Councilmember O'Neill?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Muldoon? Mayor Avery?
Aye.
That is unanimous, 7-0.
Thank you. Do we have any further business? I don't think so. All right. Well, happy holidays, everyone, and this meeting is adjourned. Good whack, huh?